to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Well, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. My name is Tom Dutta, and I am the Quiet Warrior. I'm excited to have on the show today Mr. Bobby Kipper. Bobby, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. We've been wanting to do this for a while, and I'm calling you from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I know you're down, I believe, in Newport News, Virginia. Is that right?
No, actually, I'm in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. I'm from Newport News, but I currently live on a peninsula island out in the Atlantic. It's called the Outer Banks of North Carolina in a little town called Kilduffle Hills. I'm about 4 minutes from the ocean.
Wow. Well, I'm glad we cleared that up because now I have somewhere to go. It sounds beautiful.
Yeah, so, you're always welcome.
All right. Well, I want to tell people, the audience, how we met. But first, I'll introduce you. I'd like to talk about your background. Now, we brought you on the show. We know that you're humble. You don't have an ego. You're an authentic guy. And I pulled your bio, and wow, there's a lot here. So I want to build you up. And so Bobby is a Wall Street Journal bestselling author, 4 decades of experience in public and private sector, and a journey over 26-year career with the Newport News, Virginia Police Department, which is very interesting to me. You served also following that as director of the Gang Reduction Program for the Office of the Attorney General there. And then you went on to start a successful national consulting company focusing on training and technical assistance for public and private industry. There's even more to this. In 2009, you founded the National Center for Prevention of Community Violence. Sounds like a very purposeful thing, an effort to interrupt the process of violence through proven solutions. And your efforts have been recognized. They've been recognized nationally. You've been awarded the FBI Director's Award to fight against crime in America. Gosh, recognized for outstanding contribution to law enforcement, also on media, all over the place. And what is really exciting is we'll probably talk about a book that you just published called Performance-Driven Thinking. It might be weaved in the story. I'd like to talk about that as well. So, Bobby, here's my biggest question to start off. Now that I've told everybody about you, what's one little known fact about Bobby that you think most people don't know about?
Probably that I'm terrified, even as a past police officer, I am absolutely terrified of snakes.
Wow. Okay. Have you ever seen that movie Snakes on a Plane?
I only watched the first part of it, and then I had to turn it off, Tom, to be honest.
Okay. Well, I can imagine. You sound like Indiana Jones as well. Well, thank you for sharing. Thanks for being vulnerable. So, Bobby, let's get into your story. This is about the hero's journey. I want you to take us back wherever you want to begin and tell us about your incredible story to find that purpose in your life, where you got to where you are, and weave us into the book if you can as well.
Okay, Tom, I really appreciate this opportunity. It's exciting, and I've looked forward to it as well. I basically had sort of humble beginnings. I grew up in Newport News, Virginia, and I guess a good family, a good loving family, and always from the time I was probably in the 3rd grade or so, I can remember when people would ask me, "Well, what do you want to do when you grow up?" I finally, I decided I really wanted to be a police officer. I just thought, okay, this is something that's fascinating to me, that you would be able to actually respond to people in need and do something different, maybe to help them. And plus, I've never been a clock watcher, so I thought this would be a good industry for me to look into. And as I grew older, I joked with people, and I was a baseball player. I was a baseball star in high school. I tell people that I sort of hit my way out of school. If you're hitting the baseball well enough, you certainly get the grades to stay there. So I, at the young age of age 20, I actually became a police officer in my hometown of Newport News, Virginia. I was very excited. I didn't know how much I needed to learn about, mankind and about, human behavior. But shortly thereafter, I got a real good research back into some of the worst things that people could do in life. And I got to be honest, some people look at that and it becomes a tragedy for them. I looked at the downside of behavior to include all kinds of crime and disorder in communities. And it actually made me so focused to really be that dude that made a difference. And so that sort of outlined my police career. And I was able to work my way up in the police department. And I eventually retired at the young age of 46. I had 26 years credited service. And it's funny, I went to my dad and I told him that I was going to retire from the police department. And he looked at me and he asked me, son, are they going to pay you a retirement? I said, yes, sir. He said, how long are they going to pay your retirement? I said, the rest of my life. And I'll never forget the best logic my dad ever shared with me, and he shared a lot. He looked at me and he said, son, here's the way I look at it. If a man wants to pay you for not coming to work, you may consider just taking that money and doing something different. So I did. I decided to take my police pension. I've always had this knack for, creativity and entrepreneur thinking. And that doesn't really work in police work as much as you would think it would.
Yeah.
Because you really sort of want to, you're like an assembly line as a police officer. You're one of a number of folks. But I was able to experience that through an appointment with the Attorney General's office, where I was the director of Virginia's Gang Reduction Program. And I had started a consulting group that was doing very well. And quite frankly, Tom, I didn't really want to go back into government. But when the Attorney General of the state sort of summons you to come up and be a director in his organization, it's sort of hard to say no to that if you're on a career path where you're trying to really, really make ends meet. So
Yeah.
I did that for 4 years, went back into consulting, and then decided, if I really wanted to fulfill a purpose in life, I needed to do it in the form of a mission and not a job. And I started the National Center for Prevention of Community Violence. One thing led to another. I was able to write my first book, and then I met an amazing friend of both of ours, David Hancock, who absolutely fell in love with our purpose and our mission. And he became the chairman of actually the board of my nonprofit. And so with that, David and I have partnered on a number of initiatives. And one of my favorite is the one you mentioned, the latest book, which is called Performance Driven Thinking. And I finally got to write what I've always wanted to write with a great friend and a hero of mine, a business book. Go figure, a 26-year police veteran writing a business book that then becomes a Wall Street Journal bestseller. So I have definitely I'm a blessed man. I am very humble. But I also really realize that, it's great when you get a chance to recite this, because you really feel like that there's a life of purpose. I never feel like that I'm totally there, Tom, but I feel like it's been a purposeful ride up to this point. And that's very exciting for me. And so is this current book, Performance Driven Thinking.
Well, it's pretty amazing. Well, I've been badly making notes here. I'm going to get you to hit the pause button and just talk at you for a few minutes here, Bobby. I mean, it's fascinating to me. I want to just draw a parallel to an experience, which will probably be a question too, that when I was raising my two boys, I have two stepsons who are in their 30s now. They're both married, great guys. And their two best friends in our neighborhood were children of a local police officer. And the police officer's father was the chief of police. So this ran in the family. And the mother was also a police officer. And so we'll come back to that in a moment. But I'm fascinated as well by the service of being in the force and the impact that has on family, how you navigate that. The other thing that came to mind is, I mean, there you were, you said you became this cop because it was just something you thought of. You hit your way through high school, started being a police officer at age 20, retired at 46. And then you said you saw a lot of things you shouldn't see. And this takes my mind in a journey somewhere else, that I have a friend who's doing a TED Talk, and I heard the rehearsal the other day. And she was a 911 operator, and she didn't realize, because they didn't teach it in the classroom where she was, or in the workplace, but she actually suffered from PTSD as a result of the reverse trauma. And so she had to get herself well. So you must have some innate ability or skill. I sense you're a positive man. Tell us a bit about that. I mean, I said a lot there, but number one, how was it being a police officer, and how did you maintain the strength of your family nucleus? And then how did you deal with, tell us what you might have seen, if you could, anything at all, to help us understand. How did you then go home at night and shut that off and just keep moving forward?
That's a great question, and one that I have the opportunity to talk to young police officers still today. We do a lot of national training and lifting of the police industry in America. But one of the things I would say is that I actually experienced a tremendous amount of related trauma. I investigated, homicides and serial rapists and just, you name it. It was a very active city. We were a city of about 180,000 people, and we have a fairly high homicide rate. And so there was always something that you were experiencing as a police officer, the ups and downs. And there were always more down in behavior, obviously, than up. And I think one of the things that really helped me is, I think in all of us, there's this innate, hunger of trying to reach a positive level. And for me, spirituality was very important to me in my walk, in my spiritual journey. And that really helped me to really know, I guess, the cause and effect of wanting to be better over worse. And just this week, I was actually lecturing to a group of young police officers. And I was able to share one of my most important ingredients. And it says this: never let the job that you take shape your personality, but be a good person, and then the job you take will end up being a good thing. And so that's some advice that I've given police officers along the way, because that's what I followed. And I really, instead of really putting myself in a picture over and over again of tragedy, I wanted to put myself as a resource for people to deal through tragedy. And I think it's a mindset, Tom. I really do. It's a lot like the book that we wrote about thinking, performance thinking, focus, initiative, desire, will. All that begins to impact behavior if you really start to latch onto it and believe it. So I would say that was probably my recipe to get through. Not that you don't have some memories that you feel, but that you're able still to deal through that in a positive way.
Well, that's fantastic. I wrote that down here. I forgot to mention, I also wrote down that dude that made a difference. And I was digressing that maybe that's the title of this show that we're going to put. But this thing about positive thinking, and I also made a connection in my mind to the words you used about a loving family. I mean, I think that has a big part of our ability to deal with or the life as it manifests in the future. If you know about my story, I didn't start that way with my own relationship and my family. Later in life, I struggled a bit in leadership as an executive because of some old thought patterns that were there, which today I've unwired. So I'd imagine there's a lot of officers on the force who listen to you. I mean, that was a teaching moment for the show. And I want people to come back and listen to what Bobby said there, that your personality can let it shape the job, not the other way. That's just amazing to hear. Some of these police officers, I have a friend, Bobby, in university, who teaches young students and says that half of the world today that are coming out to lead the world are broken or from broken homes where they don't have fathers or they've had some type of difficulty. So these people will come into the police force and they'll need mentors like you to help them think positively, be performance driven, because quite frankly, they don't know it, but some of the pathways in their brain are not wired that way. Let's get into another conversation about the book here. I got to just say that I love this book. Now, I have it in front of me here. I'm going to say a couple of things, Bobby, and then turn it to you. I'm honored to get it from you. It was signed, and there's a couple passages in it that you wrote. Your performance is not an option, which really stood out for me. And then your partner, David Hancock, who, yes, we both know, fine man, he says you were born to perform. So here's the thing I want to ask you. Why, or maybe a couple things you can just talk back to me, is why do some people not perform? Why do you think that is? And then the other one might be a bit more controversial, but there are some cultures out there in companies that have almost a mentality of entitlement. I'm not saying I'm against unions, but some union contracts value seniority over ability. Some companies I know have this seniority over ability, but they're not even unionized. And so in today's environment, you have young people, millennials and others coming up who don't want to wait in line. If they're performance driven, they want opportunity. Tell me how you see that and how you think, how performance driven thinking. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, I guess your first insight was right on. And what led me to write this book was the fact that I existed in a government situation to where everybody gets the same 2%. It doesn't matter how you perform, and also existed in a situation where everybody was happy if you met standards or expectations, and I've just always thought something about that doesn't drive people to a level where they really can capture what they want. And so I believe that everybody was born with an innate ability to reach for something. And the question is whether, it's having the desire. We know that people have a desire to do well. And maybe that's not in everybody's mind, but let's just face it, the majority of people want success. But there's this question about what you desire versus what you are willing to get. And so when we establish the fact that you were born to perform, I mean, let's face it, everything that happens in your life is about performance. I mean, even when you came out of the womb, I mean, people applauded and they made sure that you could cry. I mean, there were standards. They measured you. They had measured your birth weight. And then you went on to school where you got measured by grades, and then you go to work and you get measured by evaluation. So there's nothing that you can tell me in life that's not tied to some level of a graded performance, because everything is. So when I wrote the book, the mindset is that's why your performance is not an option. Look, you're going to perform, and even if you perform poorly, it's still performance. It's just poor performance. So if you look at that whole aspect, which a lot of people don't think that logically out, but when you look at it, then you have a choice. Your performance is not an option. Your level of performance is a personal choice. That gives us all a starting place, which I'm excited about, and I'm excited to coach people through that. The second issue you talked about was entitlement, which is, really covers the second chapter of the book. And it was based on a story of my son, who I coached in baseball, who we were not very good. It was a little league situation. And when you just love baseball, the game like I do, it's sort of hard to work through that process for kids who who are scared to get to the plate to hit the baseball, because I just loved that stuff when I was young. But we weren't very good. We had a losing season. And at the end of the season, my son, who was 10 years old, looked at me and said, "So, Dad, when do we get our trophies?" And this is enacted in the book, of course. And I tell the story, and it just blew me away. I'm like, "Why do you think, Andrew, why do you think we deserve a trophy? We've only won 3 games. I don't understand that." And he said, "Dad," he looked at me with these real innocent eyes. He said, "Dad, everybody gets a trophy." I just adopted the framework that day, looking at my son, that this is not good enough. We should not think this way in life, because everybody doesn't get a trophy. There are the haves and have-nots. There are people who win because they pursue something, and there are other people who don't win because they don't. So what do we do to change that framework of mindset in our society? I mean, and it's an international mindset. And our kids get it young because we want them to be okay. We give them whatever we can give them to be okay. And even if it means giving them a trophy for participation and not performance, because we feel like that's something that they're going to be happy getting. But, at the end of the day, are you really happy getting something you really didn't work for? Maybe that's the start of our thought process. So I fought that culture, and I was outspoken against that culture. And so I figured, hey, what the heck? I'm going to write a book about performance. I'm going to make that a chapter to let people know how we condition entitlement. Entitlement is not something that people are just automatically driven to. It is a process where they're given without, giving up their own performance. So I think we conditioned a whole society on that. And I just don't think it's children. I think adults are conditioned to that. And when you work in an environment where we are not grading performance, everybody being treated the same, then that in and of itself is non-productivity. And I don't know about you, Tom, but in life, I never was satisfied with meeting standards. I want people to exceed standards. And that's really what the basis of performance-driven thinking is all about. And so it's an exciting journey for me to be a part of, because it's really a passion to get people to another level.
Yeah, I love what you said there. I mean, more teaching moments for the audience to come back to, and also to get this book. I want to just, in a few minutes as we move to wrap up here, share something I wrote about your book on Amazon. I did a review on it. I want to honor it by putting it in the show as a legacy for you. But there's so many things you said there that took me on a journey in my head. So I'm going to take a little extra time today with you. One of them was a story I'm not related to actually the book, but about baseball. And you got me thinking. I remember I traveled down in the U.S. a lot when I was in a job I had as a CEO. The board of directors is in Baltimore. And well, when I went down to the meeting there, it was always a board meeting. And afterwards I had some time on my hands, and I walked down the street and literally bumped into the Baltimore Orioles baseball stadium. And, we're up here in Canada, we have beautiful stadiums, but nothing like these places you have down there. I got a ticket, and I got to tell you, I watched the game there, and it was like sitting in this city. It blew my mind, and what a great game baseball is. So you really got me emotional thinking about this whole thing about performance and using the metaphor of baseball. Up here in Canada, we love the game. The other thing I wanted to talk about was just mental health. And I like one of the things I picked up in the book, which I think is what you're meaning here, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bobby, is that the book focuses, it gets away from team and more to individual thinking, which I just love, because now I'm focusing on myself, my own performance. I know one of the things I'm a advocate for, and you'll know this if you look deeper in my story in my book, is mental health. And I want to ask you about that as well. And a lot of times when you look at depression and anxiety and some of these disorders, mental health challenges, a lot of times people compare themselves to others to be able to assess their own self-worth. And people actually who don't feel good about their own self-worth will tear down other people so that they can then become stronger and feel that they're more accomplished. And when I have a personal story where I've had an opportunity to work in a culture as well with people where they value this entitlement you talked about instead of performance more. What's interesting is what you said, you nailed it, is that while I spent some time in that environment, because I'm an A player, I'm a performer, it got to a point where after a while, my own mind started shifting and I started adapting to the culture and saying, what the heck? I mean, I'm just going to come and do my job. I'm not going to be that best performer because they don't really care about that here. So you just got my mind going and all, but touch a little bit on mental health if you can. In terms of performance, how do people keep mentally strong in their mindsets when we know as you're performing and developing your performance to higher levels, you can fail as well? Do we accept failure? Do we measure ourselves against ourselves? How does that all look to you?
I think that's a great question, and really one that is totally impacting our society in a big, big way. I do think that, obviously, our resources toward mental health and the prevention and the intervention, not only, of course, in our country, but I'm sure that you experience that as well. And Canada is an international phenomenon. I mean, how do we, first of all, what is the road that we identify with that? And, I think that there are people who have personality issues and they have bordered issues that could lead to really, some significant problems if they're not really pulled off of that pathway or that road. And I think what I hope that we can do is we can examine ourselves in each of that and where we fall into that. Because typically all of us have experienced, as you said, you experienced a family situation. I've been through divorce and some family situations. We could all make that really the pathway or the pattern of our thinking. But to graduate out of that, it really does take some effort, and it's not automatic. And so I think that what I really feel like for people to graduate out of that mindset is to understand why we are here to begin with. I mean, you have to have a starting place of purpose. I know there's been a lot about finding your why, and that's been really, really popular in leadership circles. But I think instead of it goes beyond that. We should know that there's a reason, there's an individual purpose for each person. And to solidify that, you have to really have a focus time where you sort of learn, okay, I'm here to do something. I'm here to accomplish something. And so what I hope that we can do is when people struggle through that process is find that energy, that positive, at least connection with somebody somewhere, somehow. And I believe those people are out here. I don't think that we're, you and I are in a field by ourselves. I mean, the problem is that we tend to surround ourselves in life with that negative energy too much. I mean, nationally and internationally, there's just voices of negativity that are so strong. And so if you're already having that slant toward having an issue and being down and out and being somewhat depressed, I mean, all you have to do is exist out here for any time period long and listen to the narrative, and the narrative would drive you deeper to that. But my goal is to help people defeat the narrative. It is not true that people cannot overcome some of the things that they're dealing with. And I think the power, not only positive thinking, but in my estimation, the power of focus and performance will go a long way to get you out of that mindset. So I do think it is individually driven. And I do think people like you would not be satisfied because of what I've seen you build and know about you and what you built. You would not be satisfied with the status quo because you're not a manager type person. You're a leader. And the problem that we have, and I'll let go with this, is that this world is in dire need of leadership and a whole lot less managers. You can manage a situation and a process, but you lead people. And as long as we go to that level, then I think we're going to be a greater place with greater purpose.
Oh, I love that, Bobby. I mean, I've written down a note on that. I'm just going to come back to the show and listen to it again, just for what you just said there. I think you might know this, but my father was a commanding officer in the military. He was in the British Army and then the Canadian Forces. I was raised an Army brat. I mean, command and control was my life. And that's one of the other things that came out of this for me, thinking about the book you wrote, which is brilliant, because I'm thinking about you and your background as a police officer, and I'm not labeling you, but if after my father's experiences, I mean, there's a certain type of leadership that you learn in the Army, and it doesn't work in the workplace. And I actually was wired with some things that I started out as executive and was having difficulty creating leaders because it was very much that command and control style. I totally shifted that and became successful. And after reading your book, there's many things I learned from your book, Bobby, that are going to help me be a better leader and also grow in my own performance and the things I do. I want to just honor your book again and tell you that I've passed, because you sent me couple copies I asked for. I passed it on to a couple people. One actually runs a large corporation. I stuck it in his mailbox and I said, I quoted you. I said, you were born to perform. And I said, I put a book in your mailbox. I'm a big fan of giving leaders books and dripping on them so they can then impart the knowledge in it to other people. So I'm going to share another story with you later when he tells me what he thinks about your book, because I think it's going to be a awesome story. I want to just ask you one more question before we move to wrapping up. And that is, we talk about performance-driven thinking. First of all, I want to honor you for talking about something personal on my show. You slipped out there about a divorce and challenges in life. And that's the thing, Bobby. When people come on my show, it's not always about how great they are. It's also about behind human beings, there's challenges and setbacks. There's a lot of talk about fail forward and, it's okay to fail. When we're trying to perform better, I guess if you win baseball championships, you have to lose a few games. What is one of your biggest challenges and failures you had in your journey? And, applying what you've talked about in your book, how did you push through that and become a winner here?
I think that's pretty easy because I mentioned the fact that, I went through a failed marriage, failed relationship after 22 years. And that out of life journey was probably, one of what I consider probably one of my biggest issues that I had to work through. And because I'm as you can tell, I drive positive vibes, and when things don't go very positive, I had to really learn what it was like to deal with devastation, to deal with loss. And I actually became a single dad and raised my three kids. And that was, I guess, where I just engulfed myself in my work and my creativity and in my children. And we started our own little sort of family unit, and we pursued. And, I was blessed. I mean, all three of them, one is now at college in Virginia, and two have graduated from college and are in the workforce. So that I worked through it. Here's what I really believe that will really help. And I hear all the talk about fail forward, and I like, the term sounds really good. But let me do a reverse side that may help everybody, that helped me. I had to develop what I call a small wins attitude. And I speak about that in the performance book. Small wins are that we really want to go out and believe that we can win the championship tomorrow. And I just like your listeners and for all of us to understand something. You can't win the championship tomorrow, but you can win the next game. And I think that the philosophy of that will help you get through just about any mud and quicksand that you go through in life. I had to look at the little things that were happening in my life, in my position, that really shed maybe not the bright light that I wanted, but it did shed a light. And so whatever people are experiencing today, if you can just not measure, this world tells you can have everything. You can have wealth. You can have all of these things, and it's almost going to be instantaneous. You'll grow up tomorrow, you'll get it, and you'll lose 30, 40 pounds in a week. All of that, again, is just a false narrative. The best narrative to follow is whenever you do something successful in your life, especially when you're down and out, count it as a win. Congratulate yourself. Don't be so down and out to think that any movement in the right direction is not a victory, because, Tom, it really is a victory. And for people who really go into the midst of tragedy and loss, and whether it's over a relationship or a death in the family, we have to understand that we have to work through the process and make it a small win. And you know what? If you get, 20, 30 small wins in a week, you probably had a pretty good week. And, and if you get 20 or 30 wins, you're probably getting close to your championship, aren't you? I mean, 20 games will get you into the NCAA to March Madness. So if you look at it that way, that's the way I look at it. So.
Oh, that's another great teaching moment. I'll take 20 wins any day in a week. And you said something there. I wrote this down in my paper: small wins attitude. I know you coined that phrase. What a great teaching principle. And I want to just say too, to honor you, I love you and your story. I mean, just to talk about the painful change you had to make in your life. But isn't it true? And I was told this a long time ago. I went through divorce too, so I can relate to you. I don't know the whole story, but it's painful that sometimes, when we're on the other side of it, we can't see it when we go through it because it's pain. But when you're on the other side of it, it's actually, when we look back, it might be a win. I know the change I made in my life was one that worked out to be better for me. And I see something here when Bobby's raised 3 children on his own as a single dad. That makes me now, Bobby, just so you know who I am, value your book even more, because I believe that people who have gone through adversity, people who have done things like that, have wisdom that you can't teach from a book, wisdom that you can't get from coming from a perfect nucleus. So I want to honor you for that. As we go to wrap up here, Bobby, and I'm going to let you have the last word after I say this, I want to do 2 things. One is honor you with some leadership words. I write these down as we're talking. They're not scripted. It's what comes to my mind about you. The first one is wisdom. The second one is leader. The third one is inspiring. Man, your story is inspiring. Number 4 is purpose. And number 5 is love. It comes out of you. This last story you told, you become real, and it's like, wow, this guy has this to give to the world. I think that's going to power you forward, sir. Now I want to read the review I wrote. I want to put this out there. Everybody find the book. It's called Performance Driven Thinking. That's by David L. Hancock and Bobby Kipper, bestseller on USA Today, Wall Street Journal, meaning people love this book. And here's a review I put on Amazon just before as it was released. The title is, "If this book is not what you think, you will want to change your thinking." It's 5-star. I gave it out of 5. Authors Hancock and Kipper compiled a turbocharged handbook that challenges conventional wisdom relating to high performance, turned it into a way of thinking. The paradigm of high-performing teams shifts to high-performing individual. It makes the reader focus on self. We learn in this book that performance-driven thinking connects to desire and is individual. We learn the 20 characteristics of performance-driven thinkers, as well as the common personality traits. This allows the reader to reflect on their own profile and identify strengths and limitations. The discussions on climate sets culture and time being more precious than money. Those were notable for me in my own work. The section titled "Selecting Your Stage" was excellent, defining 5 questions to answer that will help in finding your right business platform. The book is part of a bigger platform, which includes a mastermind opportunity. I'm a Canadian reader and highly recommend being part of a community that embraces performance-driven thinking. And I highly recommend this refreshing book. So, Bobby, there it is. It's out there. Tell us where to get a hold of you and your book.
Well, you can reach me. Basically, my direct email would be Bobby Kipper at thekippergroup.com. And the book, obviously, it's available at in Amazon and any online bookstore, and also in retail stores can get the book as well. And I'd like to hear from some of your listeners. I'm also on Facebook and on LinkedIn, and just enjoy connecting with people. And our desire in life is just really mine is to really make sure people are better off because they get to know me than they were before they did. And, Tom, I think if, that's my purpose. And I just hope that can become contagious with people because, we can get through this false narrative. I believe it. And I'm hoping to help people overcome that.
Outstanding. Well, thank you, Bobby. And you know what? I'd love to come down. We will collaborate in some way. I know that. And I've even envisioned sitting on the sand close to your home and playing a game, but it wouldn't be snakes and ladders. That's for sure.
Well, you live in a beautiful place that I've never visited, Tom. And so we could seriously have a conversation offline to do a trade-off. You visit me and I'll come visit you. So.
Well, the doormat is here, and I can't wait for that to happen. So on that note, Bobby, thank you for being on the show. Continue the great purposeful work you're doing. And everybody, find this show on your favorite podcast channel. As an example, iTunes. Give it a high rating to honor Bobby's work. Please go out and get his book and not only read it, pass it on to someone you care about. And live that life with passion as you hear from Bobby. Find the life you deserve and desire. And thank you for being on the Quiet Warrior Show. Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca